Yeah. Well, take whatever I'm about to say with a grain of salt, the size of a salt lamp. I can only speak from what I have put together in my own personal experience, as well as the sources that I would trust. But this doesn't mean I have anywhere near a full complex view. However, whatever I say, if it's helpful for you, then, man, I'm really grateful. There are two main ways to enter into adepthood. One is the mystical and one is the magical. Now, remember I told you there's a lot of overlap, but the mystical is, for just to make it super simple, it's the approach called the via negativa in Latin, which means like the negative way, but not STS, service to self negative. Negative in the sense of the Greek called the apophatic, which is where you enter a state of surrendering into the larger presence of God. And it's not one in which you visualize things. It's like centering prayer. Centering prayer would be an example of one, or the works of Meister Eckhart, Cynthia Bourgeault. I mean, these ideas, Thomas Keating, these ideas of basically surrendering into the unity and oneness of all things, and then from unitive consciousness, then approaching life and doing magic, kind of like high magic work. But it's not you as separate. It's like, to kind of put it as an analogy, it would be where you are entering into a larger sphere of being, and then from that larger sphere are very conscious of being embodied, but it's both you and not you. It's both you and God in you. And from that luminosity of wholeness, from that extraordinarily divine human Christ consciousness, there can do things, but also are protected in this luminosity of wholeness. And it's the mystical. And so that the mystic, for example, concentrates and orients their life towards fostering this unitive consciousness.
When you say protected, what do you mean? Protected by like the veil in third density?
Well, protected, say, by even protected by, say, for negative entities. I mean, there's times when you want to put on additional protection through magical work, depending on the work that's done. But there's a way that a truly embodied unitive consciousness person who has achieved through the mystical state a real fullness of incarnation, the way we talked about, the path up is the path down. And when that happens, like ascension is, our incarnation is ascension, the sense of like being fully here, God as me as God, me in God, God in me, pantheism, and pan-experientialism, like all of that. And then from that place, do what I call pan-sacramentalism. Pan-sacramentalism is where you as God, knowing you are God and God is in you and God is you, then blessing the whole world, like to raising it to the level of the sacrament. And Ra talks about this as being the purview of the violet ray, which is like way beyond even adept level. Adept would be the indigo. Violet ray is intelligent infinity, intelligent energy. I mean, there's no higher, and it's this sense of seeing everything, blessing everything, raising it to the level of the sacrament, which it already is in potentiation, but to recognize it, cognize original thought, cognition, God's original thought, experience the self, recognize. To think again is to take what is here, and then through your investment of love, actualize it into its fullness, to its full wholeness that always and everywhere was true in time space, and then love it into its full wholeness in space time.
Yeah.
That is the sacramental level. And that can be done through the mystical path, where you don't have to do breathing or don't have to, concentrate on body posture, that kind of thing, because you literally are in Christ. Christ being the already incarnated thought form of wholeness itself. Now, the magical path is starting from a place of even if there's a recognition of unity, it's kind of starting from a place of separation. And Ra calls this the path of in 99% of, or 95% of adepts would do the magical path, but Ra calls this the path of groping in the moonlight. That it's like trying to view reality from the perspective of like a well-lit moon, full moon. You can see a lot, but also it can deceive. Is that really what is that over there? Is that a rock, or is that a living thing? I can't really tell if you're groping in the moonlight,
Yeah.
And that's the adept path. It's mostly groping in the moonlight. Ra says few are able to grasp the light of the sun. Most are groping in the moonlight. And what the negative adept does is gropes in the moonlight and then gets epiphanies occasionally of the light of the sun, wholeness. And then, Ra says the statement of tosses their head back in grim laughter, preferring the darkness. And then sees the full picture, and then sees like the path to the full picture is not wholeness, but rather an inflammation of separation. Is like they see the wisdom of the separation. But the positive path, the adept who's groping in the moonlight, for example, and these things aren't bad. I mean, that's why they're time tested. For example, these Kriya Yoga and different kinds of breathing techniques. The Society of the Golden Dawn would be another one. But there's always going to be distortions inside them, so you still have to use a lot of discernment.
Yeah.
But the point is that here one does spiritual, like you open up the spiritual organs, this higher perception, and you do kind of exercises like you would your body, and then, but there's always this sense of ascending. So putting on layers of more gnosis, of like, like getting stronger.
Yeah.
To arrive to some kind of unit of consciousness. And then, sort of these cities being the, I guess, Buddhist word for magical capacities. And I think that, in my opinion, the time to do high magic in that sense is ending, because it's very appropriate in third density, because the veil is here, and you can actually you can learn to use the veil through faith by doing these exercises, which on one hand you don't see an immediate result, maybe for long-term immediate result. On the other hand, you do it in faith, trusting that it's going to pay off, and it does, because that's what pierces the veil, is faith and will.
Yeah.
Ra says. But I think fourth density, as we're moving into fourth density, what will become more important, because fourth density is going to be it's more of a mystical thing. It's more of a unit of consciousness, where even the sense of ecclesia, church, ecclesia is one heart, one mind. A gathering of one heart, one mind is what ecclesia means. even ecclesia comes to its full consummation in fourth density as the social memory complex forms. Do you know what that is?
I've heard of Ra talking about and concept of like they're their own. They're like more of a social concept.
Well, a social memory complex is just a fancy. It's a raw ease for saying a communitarian organism, where it's like your cells. You're a communitarian organism, but your cells aren't conscious. They're aware, but they're not conscious.
Yeah.
They're not they're conscious at the level of being a cell, but they don't have self-conscious. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Conscious means thinking with, having sentience with something else. But a social memory complex in fourth density happens because there's transparency of energy in fourth density. One cannot hide one's own everything.
It's all a part of the blockchain.
Yeah, and I mean the veil is removed, and words are chosen only if wanted. It's not necessary. You use telepathy, and it's a different kind of full communication that I experience whatever you're giving me as if it were my experience. Yeah. This is something that takes place, in fact, in third density in between lives. Whatever we did to somebody else, blessing or not, or if we've hurt somebody, say, we will, as part of our growth in karma and growth in love and law of responsibility and all these things that Rod talks about, we will actually feel as if we were that person to whom we did this thing to. Like that is part of...
It's the karma, the way we would perceive karma a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm. So that happens in fourth density immediately. And so over time, the first half of fourth density is the planet that's populated by different beings all come together into one unified consciousness. It's kind of like the internet, but it's a spiritual thing.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I guess so. Your point is to do a magical ascension. We're already heading that way anyway, kind of. We're already moving into fourth density, so you're already you're trying to hit a grand slam in ninth inning when, we're already winning by 5 or something. When you're really, we just need we
need more service.
We need a base hit.
We need love. We need service right here. So if people are doing magical works, but it's for the sake of being an adept for its sake alone,
right?
Then it's not helpful, I don't think.
It's kind of like a hermit, right, who goes off and is really ascended, but he only talks to one person every 10 years.
Well, I mean, the path, if you're doing a service to others, the path of being, say, a hermit or whatever, you do actually render the world a great service in a sense, because you're becoming an incarnated nodal point where higher love and light can actually come into and truly affect the human collective, even if you're all by yourself. But you're doing it because you are becoming one with all that is, intentionally. So you're not alone. Physically you might be, but you're not actually alone. On the other hand, what I'm saying in the magical work is, people talk about, the correct postures, and you have to do this ritual exactly like this. And even the Law of One, I mean, just to bring in the raw contact was extremely high level white magic.
Move the Bible in a certain
way.
Direction,
I mean, just inches, and it made a difference and all of that. And it's true. Or I'm not saying it's not true. But there are other ways of approaching and bringing in other ways that, that can affect change. And one of the merits, say, of Christianity at its mystical levels, I think the original levels, but also I would say one of maybe even karma yoga, I think or what is the yoga that is based in compassion? It's loving service and...
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I can't remember. It's terrible. But, this idea that if you can imagine a waterfall and let's say at the very bottom of the waterfall would be the most kind of dualistic sense of reality and third density. And then the top of the waterfall would be total unitive consciousness taking place maybe at like the violet ray, all right, like above the adept level, sacramental level. And what I think Christianity at its greatest expression and wholest expression, not well understood, but definitely there in the tradition, is to where one, as Paul says, Paul the Apostle, puts on the mind of Christ, like the heart mind of Christ. And Bourgeois talks about this a lot. But this sense of becoming unified in God here, and in the immediacy, seeing everything as this sacrament. And then what happens is that one is then only really interested, even if you're starting from the very bottom, one is really only interested in the sacramental level, to where all the other levels which exist in between, let's say the bottom of the waterfall and the very top, exist, but ultimately aren't satisfying or interesting. Whereas the magical level, like witches and, sort of the, witchcraft and all these things, they have their place, and people are very interested in them, but they can get very entrapped, say, at their particular level on the waterfall. And it's not a bad thing, because the creator learns about the creator self through these people's experiences, but then mistake whatever level they're at is for the highest and greatest, and it's not. And so magical traditions, you get to see the different levels, experience the different levels, and learn how to climb up that waterfall through doing these different rituals. That's absolutely wonderful. But what I'm saying is, if you move to the mystic and then you learn how to achieve, enjoy unitive consciousness, it's like taking the full logos here, inside me, as me, with these hands in this place. Then what's really strange is that one can often experience paraphenomena, say, and experience them as just a matter of course, just almost naturally, as a side note, even if they're not that interesting anymore. Does that make any sense at all?
Yeah, no, it does. It does.
I'm gonna turn. I mean, so just to kind of have this here is, remember the magical, the way I understand the magical is kind of like the person is below and then does rituals, and it sort of brings in the above, and the person also strengthens their sort of psychic and subtle body architecture in order to handle the greater energy. And so there's this kind of slow union from the below and the above coming together. But it's kind of like you're calling it into you. But the mystical would be like the person is in third density, and then if you could imagine, like the God fullness is coming from below and then coming inside the person's body which is above. So it's like this slow incarnating reality that is safe because it's in, through, and as the very third density, and the fullness of wholeness, of luminosity, the wholeness of God is coming inside the person and then leaking out to the world. So you move no longer I, but Christ who lives within me. Christ, the fullness. So then centering prayer for me is still probably the more boot camp like intense way, because you build the muscle of kenosis. And building the muscle of kenosis, what that means, kenosis is this Greek notion of self-emptying, of allowing, surrendering, what we might call metaphysically getting into the heart chakra, dying to the false self's desires of power, greater prestige, greater possessions, and surrendering into seeing myself and others as from a 360 view, That is, in order to do that, is really learning how to be a living ankh. Ross says the ankh is the great symbol, or ankh, however you say it, is the great symbol of the living reality that the divine, intelligent infinity gains in self and knowing itself through losing in some ways. The path of gaining is actually the path of losing. There's no manifested love that doesn't bear a price for that love. And so kenosis is certainly what the Christian path is. This path of unity and oneness through surrendering to my need to be over and above you. And it's both external and internal. So what centering prayer does is actually allows you to find inside you that place that resists connoting, resists the surrender, and highlights it. Because as you know, the path, when you do centering prayer, you're going to think 100 thoughts. And the goal of centering prayer is not to just like empty the mind, but rather the goal of centering prayer is to learn how to release every single time a thought comes up and not get attached, nor get attached to the fact that you can't do it very well.
Yeah, right.
It's simply just to allow us to grow in the capacity to detach and let go in full forbearance, in full, this is okay too, but I don't need this thought.
Yeah.
This is okay too, but I don't need this thought. So there's no demonization here. That is building the muscle of kenosis, and that lesson then can be given can be exercised in every single moment of one's not centering prayer life. When you're off the mat and you're walking around, it's an embodied state. This is the contemplative life, the embodied state of being both rootedly here, radically here in this body, in the immediacy of this life, right now with these people in this way, at this time, seeing the sacredness of that, and then intentionally desiring to be an instrument, something sounded through, a true person in that sense, person meaning the mask of that something is sounded through, to be a true instrument where the highest and greatest good, the wholeness that is in me, that emerged from the very earth and coming inside me as humus, this earth thing, this body. Humus meaning of the earth, by the way, humus, coming in and through and out me. That desire to let God in and that desire to be used by God in the highest and fullest is actually the highest and fullest adept magical thing too. And centering prayer, for example, would be one of the greatest tools that I know to build kenosis. But one doesn't have to do centering prayer. If you're conscious of it and you ask for it, you can ask for the contemplative eyes. I mean, Ra even says there's no entity without a myriad of entities to help. All that is needed is to ask. So you, for example, when you get up and you walk out that door and you're opening the door and you're walking out, and every moment is a moment of, I'm choosing the fullness of love here. I'm choosing the fullness of love here. When you're mentoring your people at work, when you're writing an email, maybe it's about mundane things about, money, whatever.
Yeah.
Can you write it, even if it's just the same words you've ever written, but can you write it from the intention of a blessing?
Yeah.
That may the recipient of this receive some form of love that brings them into a level of joy, a higher perspective to note that they are themselves gorgeous and that they deserve to take up space because they are God in this third density experience. Like, can that be that? When you shake someone's hand, can you be conscious that the fullness of God who is now activated in you is transferring energy of a high level that this person who maybe is also God, but not enjoying a fuller activated.
Yeah.
There's a potentiated fullness, and they are in potential, of course, full God, but you can activate that through intentionally passing this energy in a highest and level, a blessing, and you're just doing mundane things.
And you're not saying, "Oh, I'm blessing you." It's just,
may you be blessed in the spirit. Or like when you go down in the elevator, can you press a button and then while you're there, just pray for all the people that are going to take that elevator today, that when they walk in here, that there's something greater that's happening, it's stirring inside them, and there's a sense of unity and union where they are enjoying the mystery of oneness. Do you see?
Yeah.
That is high magic, man.
That's why you're saying like the centering prayer is the boot camp, but
it should lead you to what I just said, but you can also be intentional about it.
Yeah.
Also.
Right.
Okay.
That makes sense. Yeah.
With